It is 1956, Tucson, Arizona, and the farmers were in desperate need of a shaman, a scientist, or anyone or anything that could break the drought and make it rain. So they were intrigued when they saw a truck parked up in the middle of a dust bowl, a truck with venturi-shaped tubes pointing up at the cloudless, barren sky. This curious contraption was helmed by a skyward-obsessed Eastern European figure, eagerly watched by his 10-year-old son and, as it turned out, the FBI. This man was there in the middle of the desert in a desperate and what would be a final attempt at proving to the hostile world his controversial theories about the energy of life itself, how it could be accumulated, harnessed, and directed towards solving our planet's ills. He was there to break the drought and make it rain. This one-time mentee of Sigmund Freud and colleague of Carl Jung had the unfortunate accolade of having his books burnt by both Hitler's Nazis and the American Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. A man who would pay for his obsessive desire to save mankind from ecological disaster and alien attacks with both his freedom and his life. Welcome to the brilliant, tragic, and utterly bizarre world of Dr. Wilhelm Reich. It is the 1930s, Vienna, Austria, and Dr. Reich had made legitimate and groundbreaking contributions to psychoanalysis, and in particular, character analysis, as one of Sigmund Freud's most promising pupils. But his controversial interest in the relationship between psychological health and sexual freedom saw him crossing the established boundaries of the time. Central to this was his obsession with the energy he believed was behind the orgasm, postulating that failing to achieve a complete and healthy one brought about both personal and national neuroses. A theory that was to see him fall foul of the uptight and restrictive practices and beliefs of the Nazis, who were particularly irked when he published The Mass Psychology of Fascism. Of Jewish descent, Dr. Reich fled Germany to Scandinavia in 1933, and it was here that his ideas really began to veer into uncharted and controversial territory. He continued to explore his obsession with what he called Orgone Energy. He claimed that this wondrous energy, the universal life force, was blue and was the fundamental building block of all life on Earth, similar to the Hindu concept of prana. But even the liberal Scandinavian scientific community grew skeptical. And in 1939, as war clouds gathered over Europe and his books were burnt by Hitler's blackshirts, he made his way to what he believed was the land of the free, America, bringing his orgone theories and designs with him. He settled in Maine and was able to buy a small ranch next to a lake, which he called, not surprisingly, Orgone, where, in a complex of log and stone laboratories, he assembled a dedicated team of like-minded scientists who would now finally be free to observe and experiment with the energy of life itself. He constructed human-sized cubicles made out of layered organic and inorganic materials known as orgone accumulators. He proclaimed in numerous papers, books and seminars that if a patient sat inside one of these mysterious cubicles, the orgone energy would be absorbed from the atmosphere and permeate into the ailing sitter to cure all manner of ailments and neuroses, from impotence and, most controversially, cancer. This was a golden and exciting time for Reich and his young son, who witnessed these experiments. But with all the talk and writings about strange energy, orgasms and sexual health, not surprisingly, tongues began to wag. Trouble really began when a journalist published a scathing article about Reich entitled The New Cult of Sex and Anarchy. Reich was painted as a dangerous charlatan who preyed on vulnerable people with his ridiculous orgone boxes and outlandish theories. It wasn't long before the article caught the attention of the federal authorities, and suddenly Reich was on their radar. The FDA began what would become an 8-year investigation. This was snake oil. All of this was at a time when America was in a paranoid grip of anti-communist McCarthyism. This was Reds under the bedtime, and anyone with even a hint of left-wing sympathies was effectively cancelled by society. Reich was a prime candidate, as he had been a communist in his youth, had promoted radical theories, and now was also claiming to have discovered a new form of energy that mainstream science categorically rejected. Another red flag was that he claimed that his devices and manipulation of orgone energy could counteract the effects of radiation emitted from the hundreds of nuclear tests that were being conducted around that time. This especially made him a prime target for the real men in black. The FDA's investigation was methodical and relentless, sending undercover agents to pose as patients and customers. They collected testimonials from disgruntled former associates and former patients, hoping they would claim that Reich's treatments had failed them. But often, they were disappointed. Reich repeatedly pitched his theories to the world's leading scientist, Albert Einstein, and eventually he agreed to have one of his devices on test for several weeks. But Einstein concluded that the temperature differences attributed to accumulated orgone energy was simply due to convection currents. This was a devastating blow to Reich and his credibility within the scientific community. Having gathered a large dossier of evidence, the FDA filed a complaint in a federal court seeking an injunction to prevent Reich from distributing his accumulators across state lines, or making any medical claims about his so-called orgone energy. Here is where Reich made a decision that would begin to seal his fate. Instead of appearing before the judge to defend himself, he furiously typed an indignant letter, refusing to participate in what he called a court case against a natural and scientific phenomena, a criminal court run by and for criminals. By refusing to appear, he essentially forfeited the case. He was ordered to immediately cease the distribution of his orgone accumulators, desist from making any claims about orgone energy, and to destroy all promotional materials that related to its research. He was also required to notify all accumulator users and state that his devices were fraudulent. The court essentially declared war on Reich's entire life's work. Reich's response was characteristically defiant and self-destructive. He not only continued his research, but also continued to rent out the accumulators, believing he was fighting for scientific truth against government oppression. How can a court determine scientific fact? His followers saw him as a persecuted genius, but what they believed did not matter. The federal authorities now saw him as a criminal who was under the delusion that he was above the law. But Reich moved way beyond using orgone energy for mere therapy, as he was convinced that, as it was an all-permeating life force, orgone energy could be harnessed to influence the weather. Simply put, he believed he could make it rain. His solution? A device he called a cloudbuster. Essentially a series of metal tubes mounted on a movable platform, MacGyvered from a disused anti-aircraft gun, so it could be moved back and forth and caress the sky. This, he believed, would draw stagnant energy out of the atmosphere, allowing natural weather patterns to resume. And Reich wasn't just theorizing about this. He was out there with his cloudbuster in the fields of Maine, claiming dramatic results. But then his story took yet another bizarre turn. UFO sightings were capturing America's imagination, and Reich became convinced that not only flying saucers were real, but also that they were hostile, and that they, along with the government, were onto him. And of course, these UFOs were powered by Orgone Energy. Energy that could be used on Earth to replace oil, gas, and nuclear power. But these evil space invaders were also using the energy for malevolent purposes, poisoning the planet, causing droughts, diseases, and all manner of environmental disasters. Along with his young son, Peter, Reich decided to fight back, launching what he called Operation Space Scat, using the cloudbusters not to make rain, but to disrupt and deter those pesky aliens and prove to the government that he was on the side of humanity. These strange lights in the sky would apparently dim or even disappear when he aimed a cloudbuster at them. These cosmic engineers were in the forward trenches of no less than an interplanetary war. This new obsession with UFOs was manna from heaven for the federal authorities, who were only too delighted to use these outlandish claims against him. Here was a mad doctor, a charlatan and cult leader who not only claimed he could control the weather, impotence and cure cancer, but also claimed he was single-handedly defending planet Earth from an alien invasion. Definitive proof that Reich was dangerously delusional and potentially harmful to public safety. And the FDA investigators who spied on Orgone found that, far from complying with any of the judge's injunctions, it was indeed business as usual. They promptly returned to court with their evidence, and this time Reich could no longer ignore the legal system. He was cornered. But a lifeline came when he was approached by some Maine blueberry farmers who were desperate for him to break their severe drought. They had heard about his weather experiments and were so desperate that they were willing to try anything. Reich set up a cloudbuster in the fields of Maine, and according to his records, significant rainfall followed within days. Coincidence? Natural weather patterns? The farmers of Maine were impressed enough to pay him $10,000, and word began to spread about the eccentric scientist who could make it rain. But Reich's most ambitious weather control project was yet to come. Another group of desperate farmers invited Reich to attempt to break their drought, but this time it was in Arizona. If he managed to succeed here, he would have definitive proof of the validity of his theories to the authorities and to the hostile world. And so he descended upon Tucson, Arizona, cosmic engineers, and he and his son Peter were its commanders. The results were spectacular. Well, according to Reich, they were, claiming to have produced significant rainfall across multiple areas, saving countless acres of farmland. Skeptics pointed out that Reich's spectacular successes often coincided with natural weather patterns that meteorologists had predicted. Reich, the drought buster, cosmic environmental warrior extraordinaire or not, returned to Maine to face trial for his repeated flouting of his injunctions and blatant, aggressive contempt. The trial was brief and brutal. Reich, of course, represented himself and delivered a rambling, esoteric speech about atmospheric engineering and cosmic energy, while the prosecutors methodically presented evidence of his violations. He genuinely believed he was being persecuted for discovering revolutionary scientific truths. Like Galileo, who faced the Inquisition for postulating the Earth revolved around the sun and not the other way round. A lone genius being suppressed by the ignorant authorities, corrupted by money from energy companies and big pharma, who probably had lousy orgasms. The judge was not impressed by Reich's pseudo-scientific theories or his claims of persecution, and promptly sentenced him to 2 years in a federal prison for criminal contempt of court. But the punishment went far beyond imprisonment. Like a zealous occupying army, federal agents swooped on Orgone, destroying his research materials, burning his books. Decades of research disappeared in a matter of days. Reich, in his prison cell, spent hours staring out of his windows up at the sky, convinced that somewhere out there, maybe the good aliens would rescue him. But no one came. Just 8 months into his sentence, Dr. Wilhelm Reich died in a federal prison. He was 60 years old. The official cause of death was heart failure, but those who knew him said he had been broken by watching his life's work destroyed by the very government he had hoped would embrace his discoveries. The scientific consensus remains clear. There is no credible evidence that orgone energy exists, let alone has any therapeutic effects, and that a row of tubes strapped together cannot control the weather. But I am not sure the farmers of Maine or Arizona would agree or care. Reich undoubtedly made genuine contributions to psychology and psychoanalysis, but somewhere along the way, did his brilliance cross over into arrogance and narcissistic delusion? Or was he just a man before his time? Any Kate Bush fans out there will have resonated with the term cloudbuster, her wonderful song that for copyright reasons I sadly can't play here. The song was inspired by Peter Reich's beautiful memoir, Book of Dreams. Young Peter witnessed firsthand his father's experiments and attempts to make it rain with those strange and fantastic machines. And also he was there to witness his sad demise. I first heard about Reich and his incredible work in Scotland when my VW camper blew up next to a field with a teepee in it. Its occupants kindly made me a brew, and around their fire they told me this strange tale, and also that they had once actually made a cloudbuster themselves, and it had worked. It rained for 4 solid days. But they admitted this was in Wales. I hope you've enjoyed this gripping yarn. Please like and subscribe and share and comment if you will. It helps the algorithm. Take care. Till next time.